Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Hey, welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, and this is your host Todd DeVoe speaking. And wow, I mean, can we add any craziness to 2020? So Christmas Day, we have a bomber, which we're really not sure what his motivation was. They found DNA at the scene, and they know who it is. They're just not sure why yet. And then here in Southern California, we had some pretty decent storms last night or yesterday, and we had a hailstorm that made it look like it snowed in Orange County, California. So it was kind of interesting. So anyway, hope everybody had a great Christmas and Hanukkah this year. We are coming to the end of 2020, thank God, and we're moving into 2021. So this is going to be the last business continuity today for 2020. Yes. So we talk about Christmas morning, the bomb exploding in Nashville. And so the interesting thing about this is the RV announced a countdown, told people to evacuate. And then, according to some reports, they're playing a song, a 60s song called Downtown. If you remember that song or not, you can look it up. It's a kind of interesting. It's going to be a different take on it from now on. So the FBI said that the guy who they found may be a 5G conspiracy theorist, but they're not sure about that. He's done some kind of wacky stuff in general. He gave away couple of his homes, I guess, to some he's 60 something years old. He gave his homes away to some 29-year-old woman that I don't know how he met, but I guess I've never met face to face. And so that's how it started, right? So he does this, all the other crazy stuff that's going on. Now, this is the crazy part. If I pitch this idea as a movie to a Hollywood producer, they'd kick me out of the office telling me that, yeah, this is, it's unbelievable, right? And so we're in the midst of a pandemic, and we get all this going on, and it's just insane. So that being said, the pandemic, it's surging again. Numbers in New York and California are increasing. We're on a second stay-at-home order here in California, but people aren't paying attention to it. So in New York City, they arrest a bar owner for not complying with the health order, and a California sheriff, some of them are not enforcing the governor's mandates. So we have that. So can 2020 get any stranger? We only have a couple more weeks, or a couple more days left on that, I should say. And so how do we create plans that cover all this, right? I mean, we could not write a plan that big. It would be volumes for this, right? For every potential contingency that's out there. So the better way to do this is to embrace, and I know this is not new news, right? But I think we need to go over it again, because that's a question that's been being asked about, like, oh, how do we plan for all this and whatnot? But if we take that all hazards approach, and for those of you who haven't really got deep into what the all hazards approach is, what it isn't throwing everything at this plan, right? It is a integrated approach to emergency preparedness planning that focuses on the capacities and capabilities that are critical to preparedness for a full spectrum of emergencies or disasters. I think that's a great definition. All right, I'll do it one more time. Integrated approach to emergency preparedness planning that focuses on capacities and capabilities that are critical to preparedness on a full spectrum of emergencies or disasters. So that one common misconception is that all hazard planning means planning for everything that you could possibly go wrong, and catalog it and put it in this big huge binder. Like I said, it'd be volumes, but you can't do that. It's impossible to, because who in their right mind would think that during a pandemic, planning for, I'm talking about, not Hollywood, right? But would go so plan for having a pandemic, and then on Christmas morning having a guy drive a RV downtown, evacuating everybody on their own and then blowing the place up. And then now what you lost with that was you hit the AT&T center. So ATMs are down. I don't know if they're back up yet or not, but they were the other day. My niece and sister, they both live in the Nashville area. So they were telling me that all the ATMs are down. You couldn't use credit card anywhere you went. So it's almost like an earthquake, right? In that aspect of things. So phones are down, communications are down. So that really was a communications issue. You have a bombing issue. You have the investigation on that, and then you have the pandemic that's still going on. And then of course, your regular other daily emergencies. So you couldn't plan for that in one plan, but you could do, taking the all hazards approach. So what you want to do though is you want to look at what your hazards are, right? So what kind of hazards do we have? We have IT outages, we have weather related incidents, power outages, natural disasters, fires, wildland fires. You have other facilities management incidents, security related issues, cyber security incidents, which are going on right now. We've had a cyber security attack as well during this time, and also things like transportation and travel disruptions. So you make plans kind of broadly into that aspect of how do you touch each one of these things, and so you pull out those ideas or those plans, when they occur. So the big thing though is to put processes and protocols in place. And I'm a process guy. I really, sometimes people, make fun of people who are process guys, and I'm okay with that, because you need to have some sort of protocol process to go through when something happens. And then even if you think about pilots, right? And I think that's the best example. A pilot, every time they get into a plane, they have their checklists. And these guys some of them are 20, 30-year pilots. They're not brand new. You'd think that they would know it by heart, but they still go through that checklist every single time, right? To make sure that they've hit every point, because we're human and we make mistakes. So I like the idea of checklists that are set for you to go through during an emergency, and that's the kind of the protocol or process that I really embrace, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't be flexible, right? Because we talked about this before, the concept of semper gumby, right? Or always flexible, right? Being flexible is very important as emergency managers, so we could pivot and we can move as things needed, right? But the idea of having that process and protocol in place is very important, because when things go sideways, what do? We go to our lowest level of training, right? So that means, do you ever get mad at something, or something occurs and you try to pick up the phone and by memory dial a phone number, right? In some cases you can't do it. That's why, our cell phones, luckily today, we have those, I can hit one button, boop, and call a number, because dialing goes down to the point to where it's hard to do now. So having processes and protocols in place, having those checklists in place, and those action steps in place are very important to when you're running an incident. So once you have your list of hazards, you need to figure out specific action steps to take for each emergency, and these can including naming staff who are responsible for executing the emergency plan and their duties, right? Having that list of supplies, maintenance, and equipment that will be needed to keep the operation going. And one of the things that I've done is I have my EOC in a box, basically, right? Everything that particular person needs would be there for them. They're not looking all over the place for it. Even including the plans are in there, the checklists are in there, the pencils are in there, sharpeners, everything is that you need to run your station is right there for them to grab and go. You do training, all right? And training is important. Training on how that stuff works, right? Because again, you go to your lowest level of training. So if you haven't touched that box in months, are you comfortable in doing that job, right? And then I want to go back to training here for a second. So doing I know it's hard to do now because of COVID, but even I would do an EOC training um, on odd times. I wouldn't necessarily uh, do it every Friday at 10 o'clock, because then you get used to that idea of every Friday at 10 o'clock as a training, and that's no, you do it at a different sort of times, and you have to make sure. I know it's hard. It's hard to make people's schedule go in and out of that, but that's just my recommendation. And if it works, if it does. If not, I mean, make it work for you. But that way, it does. People don't get into that routine. And the last thing too is communications, right? And you need to be able to have proper communication. And I think that's one of the most, like I said, I had this before. We talked about this all the time, and I seem to be harping on it as of late. But the idea here is every single time that we have a a an event, a disaster, even a planned event, right? When we do the after action report, we're sitting there doing the debriefing. The first thing that's always on is communications. And so I don't know how, and this is like one of those things that perplexes me. Like, how do we get past that? I'm not sure, but having proper equipment, having proper protocols, again, will help with that. Talk about mass communication systems to be able to communicate not only with your constituents, the people who, like your citizens, or the people who are in your business, right? But also to be able to communicate in a easy way with your team, right? So the days of the phone trees and loudspeaker announcements, those are kind of going away, right? Phone trees are gone. Most people here that are listening probably don't even know what a phone tree is anymore, but those are gone, right? So today the workforce is all over the place, right? How do you communicate with people in different parts of the state, different parts of the city, different parts of the country, different parts of the world in some cases, with one push of the button? So that's some of the things that you need to work with. Of course, today with the pandemic, we have employees now at different locations within the city because no one's going to the office. So how do you communicate with them? And so the tools that you're choosing are important. And Titan HST, the sponsor of this podcast, of this event, has a great communications tool that's out there. They can communicate through email, through phone, through text, through social media. There's two-way text with or communication with each other, with everybody who you send a message out to. They have polling. They have all sorts of great communication tools are wrapped up into this one app, including the fact that it's a mesh network. Once it makes it turns your phone into a mesh network device, which is really kind of cool, because even if when the phone systems go down, like what would happen over in Nashville, right? The phones are still able to communicate with each other as long as they're within 1,000 yards of each other. So I think that's a kind of a cool feature, that when you're taking a look at communications, how do they work when the network goes down? Because everybody's phone works great. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. My phone, I live up in the hills, and phone's over a pain in the butt. If you ask a friend, I had to go to certain areas of my house, right? So, but most phones work great on a daily basis, right? But now, when you put stresses on the system, do they still work? I tell a story of when there was the earthquake and the central office in Seal Beach went down, and we lost communications for Seal Beach, Los Alamitos, Long Beach. And the reason why Los Alamitos was important in the story as well is that that's where the state's Southern California's the EOC is there, right? And they lost communications as well. So what communication backup plan do you have? And work with it, right? Work with it as if communications are down. So when game day happens, you're able to utilize it. So emergencies aren't fun to think about. And of course, no one wishes these to happen at any time. So planning ahead and using all the all hazard approach is the most effective way to fight that disaster that will occur. And hopefully you're not dealing with a pandemic, a bomb explosion, and a bad weather all at the same time. But there's a possibility. So using the all hazards approach is always the right way to do it. So thank you for being with us today. And visit Titan HST for all your communications needs. And remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. And join us next week. Until then, stay safe and stay hydrated. And everybody, please have a happy and prosperous new year. And thank you for being with me today.